welcome. You all know why you're here, or at least you might know, and you know why I'm here too. I'm here to explain to you what's with these groups. This is a Rainbow Six Siege Esports PowerPoint presentation brought to you by myself, Jerry the Music Man, and it's starting now. So, here is your answer to the question of what's with these groups. It's based on stage 1 seeding from the group stage and deciders to avoid any potentially altering external influence. And that is everything. So thank you very much. I'm glad so many people showed out in force today. It's been a real privilege, and I hope that goes some way to explaining exactly why these groups are the way they are. Now, of course, I've got a 5-page script. Don't worry. Okay, so here's the long version. Now, Europe League Stage 2 starts on Monday, and these are the groups up here. Yeah, they're not great. They are very, very unbalanced. There's been a lot of talk about these. So we'll get into that. In case you're unfamiliar, Europe runs a pair of 5-team round-robin groups to kick off the season before all this happens. And so your fate might be decided very early on, as these groups will either guide you gently towards a quick journey towards the major, or they throw you into the fiery pits of the qualifiers, where dragons be, and Kangaroo Kenny, and also Italians. So these groups matter a lot, and you can understand how pissed off some people might be, looking at you, Helby and Wolves, when you get given a seemingly brutal group like Group B. And you can look over there and see, you know, Group A is just sort of frolicking around this little kid's playground. There's no comparison here. So just to hammer home the imbalance between these two groups, here's a table that shows major appearances and notable trophies over the past year and a half, comparing Group A with Group B. And you can see that obviously Group A, you've got 4 total major or SI appearances between them. Compare that against the 19 total major and SI appearances across Group B. And you've also got a list of notable trophies there. And note that, of course, BDS have picked up quite a lot, but there are a few more on that right-hand side than there are on the left-hand side. Is this all a fair comparison when a lot of Group A's teams are relatively newly formed? A lot of this data is from March 2022, or from since then. Yes, that's a fair comparison, because there's a reason that teams get together. It's called winning. And Group A don't tend to do that as much. So how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss. It was only a kiss. To understand, we must travel back in time to the year 2023, to the month of March, and to the days of Mondays and Tuesdays every evening on twitch.tv/Rainbow6. Groups in Stage 1 of EUL were absolutely wild, literally, before they suddenly weren't so wild in the deciders. Wolves came bottom of their group, but ran the gauntlet through qualifiers to somehow reach Copenhagen, and BDS had an uncharacteristically dull performance throughout. Everything else, though, was roughly as expected, with Virtus Pro, G2 and M&M taking podium spots, and TT9 shitting the bed in record-breaking fashion. Flash forward to the present day, and Stage 2 needs its group sorting, so Blast take the decision to do so using the group stage and the deciders of Stage 1, which looks like this. So this is the seeding based on the Stage 1, groups and deciders. The seeding process draws entirely from these portions, and there's good reason for this. The qualifier playoffs not only filtered down the underperforming teams from the group stage, the pro teams, but also introduced outsider teams from outside the top tier pro circuit, such as X10star and others who made their way through the open qualifiers, and to LCQs where Done Limited were introduced. Even though this was a one-off transitional decision to give reward to the final ever set of Challenger League teams, which won't be a factor anymore, because Challenger League is redundant, There is still the possibility of teams from outside the Europe League coming in through the open qualifiers and affecting the rankings if you were to try and determine those rankings through these later stages, such as the LCQs. In short, the new seeding ignores anything with potential external influence. That means ignoring anything within the circuit after groups and deciders in stages such as the LCQs, but also the major itself, which obviously has a lot of external influences, i.e. the teams from the rest of the world. It also means ignoring any unofficial non-circuit tournaments like the off-season tournament of Gamers 8, even UB-licensed leagues like Combine and Rumble, despite the fact that these teams could give more recent and arguably more accurate data on the power rankings of teams. Not only are they influenced by external factors, but also aren't even part of the official circuit, so considering them is out of the question. And because there were no official Blast circuit action during the off-season, these two places, the groups and the deciders of Stage 1, are the most recent and purest reference point available. Of course, the downside of all of this is that we've ended up basing seeding in some cases on the results of 4 best-of-1s in March. So everything that just happened in the group stage and has happened to Wolves, for instance. Having such a large-scale intermingling system like this, where the initial group stage and deciders are relatively small, and then external teams come in and start competing very early on, evidently makes things quite messy. In principle, there's nothing too wrong about using the most isolated collection of games, these ones highlighted in red, to source seedings from, but in practice, it's those group stage anomalies that cause the issue here. See, despite their low seeding, Wolves and BDS are actually quite good. BDS have just won their second consecutive Gamers 8 trophy, overtaking the previous record holders of themselves. Wolves may have had an embarrassing reverse sweep against them at the recent Combine finals, but at least they were there, something that they're very good at being. They've attended every single major event for the past year and a half. Both French majority squads have been consistently high performing throughout that whole time. And the only difference really is that BDS actually wins stuff. And no, Wolves, French League doesn't count. Of course you're going to win that. That's piss easy. Based on this handful of games, though, that went by faster than you could say Blast Europe League Stage 1 groups and deciders, BDS placed 7th and 8th, Wolves 9th and 10th. The best way to break down the real issue here is to focus on one team, though. So I'm going to take the team that quite obviously has drawn the short straw here, and that's Wolves. So you're probably thinking, Wolves shouldn't really be 9th or 10th seed at all. They made it to Stage 2 of the major. They are technically a team in the top 11 in the world from that tournament in Stage 1, having just barely missed out on making the final cut for the final 8 and the main stage of the major. In terms of EU teams, this still only puts them 3rd or 4th overall out of 10, but that's way higher than the 10th place seed they've wound up with. If you're a fan of the global standings being used for 6 Invitational, or SI points, as they're more commonly known, Wolves sit in 16th, where, hilariously, they're tied with LATAM teams 6 Karma and Revan. SI points are not great at comparing teams across regions, we already kind of know that, but they actually work really well if you focus solely on an individual region, such as Europe, because they ignore the principle of avoiding external influence and take more games into account, like the LCQs and the Major itself. When you do that, Wolves are 4th, and you end up with a much better looking seeding overall. So why are we not using these more robust and all-inclusive seeding systems if they exist? Is that not what they're there for? Now, before I move on and address that question properly, I want to address a side note, and I couldn't really find a better place for it in the script, so it's just getting jammed in here. I think it's also somewhat important here to touch on the TT9 and Wolves issue. Both came last in their Stage 1 groups, and officially that puts them in 9th/10th place. But with no seeding match, the distinction between 9th and 10th, which is important to know because it determines which Stage 2 group you're in, was made by a coin flip, according to Helby, the Wolves coach, giving them effectively the 10th seed. This coin flip has put Wolves in the group of death, while TT9 escaped to the relative safety of Group A. But that coin flip to me seems completely unnecessary. Why didn't they just look at groups? Couldn't they have looked at groups and seen that Wolves had a better record, gaining 2 points instead of the one that TT9 did, and used that as a basis? The same could have gone for 7th and 8th, and presumably that went to a coin flip too, which luckily actually did put BDS and Koi in the correct place in terms of 7th and 8th, respectively. But it's random and inconsistent. What you want is the ABBA system, A, B, B, A, with 1st and 4th being paired together, and then 2nd and 3rd. And then you just repeat that process through 5th through to 7th, or sorry, yeah, 5th through to 8th, and then 9th and 10th. But it's not what's happening here. They've kind of messed it up. So in my honest opinion, you know, seeding wise, this is what we've been left with after the coin flip, or the pair of coin flips, and really there shouldn't have been a coin flip at all. TT9 and Wolves should be swapped over. But anyway, that's a little bit by the by. So we're going to go back to that question. Why are we not using SI points to seed groups? So there's some interesting information here. While I was making this script, I reached out to, first of all, Fresh, who had no idea, but then to Blast to answer a different question that I didn't know the answer to. I wanted to know, how do they seed the teams, or how did they seed the teams for Stage 1 groups back in March? You know, with all the hullabaloo of an entirely new format and ecosystem arriving, I didn't really think twice about it, but they had to have seeded those groups, right? And they did. I got an answer very quickly from Mr. Blast. They used the SI points only from the previous season to Stage 1, to seed the groups in Stage 1. So the reason I asked that question was because of one other thing that was plaguing my mind. Is there a case for consistency? Should we have used whatever seeding system we used for Stage 1 groups right now to seed Stage 2? If last stage was seeded using SI points, then why isn't this stage seeded using SI points? The end result in Stage 1 with that system was a pair of groups that were reasonably well balanced on paper and in practice too. We even ended up with 2 teams from each group reaching the major, and no, that isn't a given. The way these groups look though, I'd be surprised if we didn't end up with 3 or even 4 of the Group B teams going to Atlanta. SI points from last year gained partially from the 3 stages of regional leagues, and then partially from the 3 major events during the year. As a side note, Wolves were ranked 3rd in the global standings. As you can see, this is the overall number, so it was W7M, BDS, and then Wolves in the global standings overall after last year. This year, SI points work similarly, with points first gained by teams via the regional system, then further points gained at major events like Copenhagen and Atlanta. So SI points certainly involved a lot of external factors because of the majors, and these are the external factors that this new system of seeding, using only groups and deciders, avoids by design. That's the philosophy. So, of course, I was curious to see what the groups would have looked like if Blast had used SI points again. So, these are the current SI point tallies of all European teams. And this is the seeding of those Europe League teams that would produce. So just removing X10 Star and Dun Limited from the equation. And, drum roll, these are the hypothetical Stage 2 groups based on that SI point seeding, the same way that Stage 1 was seeded. Ta-da! Oh, I need to move my head. Hold on. Ta-da! Look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? Can we just spend a moment and appreciate this? It's absolutely gorgeous. You know, this is the world we could be living in. These are the groups that we could have had. Look at it. Look at it. It's so balanced. I just think, you know, cast aside all precedent of, you know, points and rankings and seedings, just think, how good are these teams? Make a little prediction amongst yourself. You know, they're much more balanced groups. They are way more balanced groups. You look at Group B in the old one and you think, there's no way I can choose between the 4 powerful sides. Heroic are just in the dumpster. There's no way they get out of that. This is great. Makes so much sense. You know? So does this mean that using SI points is better in principle? Well, no. Or at least, it depends on your principles. The LCQs made a difference to the SI points totals. And while there aren't any significant anomalies here, if either Challenger League team had made a decent run, then that could have drastically altered the lower half of the seedings if you were using SI points, because, of course, SI points are determined somewhat by the LCQs. Now, I'd argue that's absolutely fine, to be honest, But I can see the validity of wanting to avoid that and keep it as pure as possible. Now, of course, if you've come this far down the rabbit warren with me, you're probably thinking, what's the point? Why is he doing this? The groups are already set now. Nothing's going to change. Well, yes, this whole video is largely an exercise in scrutiny, hindsight, and futility. But I do think it's necessary to scrutinize these things. While any hope of immediate change is likely futile, we are in a transitional year and missteps will be made. You know, is this even really a misstep? Am I blowing it out of proportion? Maybe. But this isn't just about seeding, is it? If we just stand idly by, then our great esports, our glorious Rainbow Six Siege, might be at risk. I don't want to live in a world where I can't moan about things on the internet. My soup is too hot, and I need you to know that. Siege can be great again. Seeding matters. Siege matters. And with this, I'm announcing that I will be running for president. My God is my witness. Okay, you know, that's it. Fuck. Alright, we're done. Thanks, everyone. Any questions? Oh yeah, I'll be casting on the weekend with 2 doors on this channel for the Open qualifiers. So, yeah, give me a follow if you want to see those. I know Fresh is going to be doing some as well. Yeah, cheers for coming along, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.